It has. It certainly has. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the last collaborate session for the semester. I'm so excited. The end is very, very close, and I'm so proud of all of you for sticking with your studies this semester. I know that it can get incredibly overwhelming, so good on you for sticking with it and becoming one step closer to our ends. But before we get to graduation, let's get through this case study. So, the help guide. This is me unpacking the case up front. Thank you very much. It is nice lipstick, Maybelline. This will go for probably 50 minutes if I rush, Rebecca. So, as I was saying, please get your phones ready because for a very odd reason, I'm going to get you to take a selfie of you watching this collaborate at some stage. So bear with me on that one. Okay, so the case study. We're doing a care plan for Mr. Thomas Lee. Now, Thomas is a completely fictional character. No relevance to the real world. Actually, no. It does have relevance to the real world. He's based on every patient that I've ever looked after. So this has a 2,000 word limit. Now keep in mind that this word limit is fairly small considering the amount of concepts that you need to cover. So don't get intimidated by 2,000 words. This is not an essay that you have to structure formally and write amazing introductions for and conclusions for and linking sentences and all those things. This is just small notes based on concepts that you identify as concerns for this patient. So this is 40%. This is the home stretch for this subject. This is where you can really get an amazing grade in this subject. And it is due on the 23rd of May. At 4 o'clock Darwin time. So Darwin time is a little bit different to other places, which made me laugh quite a bit because there was a lot of late submissions saying, sorry, I forgot about the time difference. So just keep that in mind. Now the document that you will need for this case study to analyse the issues is found down here. Now, I've just realised that I'm pointing at my screen. That really doesn't help you at all. But see this little link here with the blatantly obvious red arrow on the assignment page? And download this document, print it out, and go through it. So the task. Essentially what's happened is that Thomas has come to his normal GP and we've done his first over 75 health assessment. So the GP has gone through and filled out this beautiful form, collected all of this information for us, and then he said to Thomas, you know what, I think you need to see our beautiful, lovely, intelligent practice nurse, and he or she is going to put together a care plan for you. So in this care plan, and thank you very much. It is the best doctor's handwriting. Took me about 9 goes of writing out that bloody form. Oh, beg your pardon. So, as a result of this care plan, as a registered nurse, we need to go through and identify the areas of concern. Yes, this is a fictional scenario. You don't know, Thomas, that there is blatantly obvious information there that at a 3rd year level, you should be able to figure out, you know, what's really going on. So your mapping needs to not only look at the pathophysiological, start that one again, doesn't just need to look at the disease processes, but it needs to look at the holistic well-being of this particular patient. Now, as part of this, we need to organise 3 community referrals for Thomas to encourage his independence and his well-being. And it's very easy for us as registered nurses to say, oh, you know what, I'm just going to refer him to the OT. but that's where our involvement in it stops. What I want you to do is to find services in your community that are relevant to this patient that will help with his situation. And I'll say this a million times over during this presentation. Let's help Thomas with his situation, not old people everywhere generally, okay? Not this. We need to be very specific and know the details that are in that document. Okay, at the end of this, because one of those 3 services that we will be referring Thomas to is an ACAT team. ACAT team? No, ACAT assessment. So we need to write an ISVAR handover. And we all know ISVAR handovers. We can probably do them quite well now, and it's really just a summary of the health assessment and the priorities that you find. So we need to let the registered nurse on the ACAT team know everything there is to know about Thomas in 500 words. Okay, now on to the next one. So the presentation, same deal as last time. Size 11 Calibri and 1.5 spacing, only so my eyes don't go, I can't see it. Please put a footer in with your name. Don't worry about a title page, no cover pages, no CDU cover pages, no diagrams, doodles, photographs, anything untoward in your essay. It's actually quite funny. I had a colleague who works at another university who, this is a bit of a long story, but the short version is she was marking assignments and apparently the student didn't feel that she was reading them thoroughly enough and trying to slip in a couple of very interesting phrases into the body of the text. So don't include that. Sorry, that was a rabbit hole and not particularly relevant to the subject, so I'm very, very sorry. Don't worry about an introduction or a conclusion. It's not an essay. Just dot points will be fine. And you will find that because you're not writing an essay and just really just banging out all those nursing issues, 2,000 words, you won't struggle to get to it, you'll struggle to condense it. Now the headings on the template that I've provided, you can change them as you see fit. When I originally wrote this, the headings make sense to me because I've got 15 years of nursing experience behind me, and I can see the delineation, but also make the links between the two. But at this point, change the headings to whatever you think suits this particular case. I would prefer that you use headings simply so it's easier for me to keep up with where you're going and what you have covered and what you haven't covered. But you can change them to whatever suits you. Okie dokie. So use appropriate professional terminology and formal academic language. However, there's a caveat to that, and we'll come to that later. You can use acronyms, you can use abbreviations. That's absolutely fine within the care plan and the handover, as long as they're standardized and they're not just ones that you've made up yourself, because then I won't know what you're talking about. So keep to standardized abbreviations. Please use the template that's provided. This is essential only because students tend to get a lot of different formatting that eventually becomes a bit hard to read. So just stick it on the one that I've provided. I've done half the work for you anyway. You will. Okay, this one. Here's this one. So where to start? Where do you go with this care plan? Firstly, what I want you to do is print out the care plan or read it online, whatever you're more comfortable with. Make some notes. Identify the issues that you find along the way. So consider the patient. Not, again, old people everywhere, older Australians everywhere. Mr. Thomas Lee. This is specific to him. Collect the clues and the information. And then the third part of the clinical reasoning cycle is process the information. Essentially what this means is link the concepts. So you'll find that one issue filters into 4 other areas. And at a 3rd year standard, I expect that you make these links. I'll explain that. I'll give you an example later on of what I'm actually talking about. And it's not as complicated as it sounds. It's just pointing out the obvious similarities or overlaps to people. Identify the problems. So once we've got through all of that, identify the problems that you're really concerned about. So the things that you know Thomas can't go on living independently if these problems still hang around. And then establish the goal as you see fit, give the rationale. All right, there's just a couple of quick questions. 500 words is included in the 2,000 words. So you've got 1,500 words for your mapping and then 500 words for the ISBAR. You can, I prefer that you don't, actually no, you can't exceed the 10% word limit. No. It's a quick answer to that one. Okay, so the referrals that I'm talking about. 3 community services that will promote independence. You need to give justification as to why you're referring to the service. So you can't write things like, I'll refer to a speech pathologist and just leave it hanging there. You need to tell me why it's relevant and why it's important for this particular service. Work it into the nursing interventions or the rationale or wherever you'd like. These are not standalone topics that you just pop in down the end. Work it into the mapping. And again, I'll show you this later on. Don't be afraid to think outside of the box. The reason why I've designed this assessment is because of what I talked about before. As acute care nurses, or in this degree, we're very conditioned to only think about what happens in the hospital, in our little boxes. Everything that happens inside of the hospital. And we very rarely kind of venture out into the community. And when we do, we get a bit scared and think, oh, no. But what I want you to know is that acute care is not the be-all and end-all. I have an acute care background, but there's a lot more that happens in primary healthcare that acute care nurses tend to give credence to. So get to know your community, get to know what's available, because you will make a difference in your patient's life. So the first one, I've already decided for you. You need to refer your patient to ACAT. What you need to do to kind of figure out this process is look at myagecare.com.au. Now this is a website that's set up for patients to manage, sorry, someone's just making funny faces at my window, patients to manage their own ACAT assessments, so their own interventions to stay at home longer. GPs have these great cards that say, there you go, just go onto this website and go through the process. When you go onto this website, because you need the specific information that's relevant to your state, when you go onto this website, what I want you to do is give some thought to how difficult this process would be if you were, say, 75, not particularly computer literate, and we're in a position where you needed help at home. This is a complicated process, and this website is a little tricky to navigate through, so keep that in mind. This is why registered nurses of the future need to become experts in this referral process and with ACAT teams. ACAT team. I keep saying ACAT teams, but you know what I mean. These people do amazing work and make amazing differences to keeping people at home longer, but it's a very underutilized service. As registered nurses, we can make a big difference in that. Anyway, I digress. So coming back to the referral, I want you to include specific information, not generic, very, very specific. Firstly, you need to give me the name of the community service. So not refer to the OT. I want refer to Muirhead speech pathology. So something specific, a real organization that actually exists in your community. Give me the contact number, just in brackets. Tell me what the fees are, because let's think about it. If people in the community over the age of 65 living on a pension, that's only $860 a fortnight. That's not very much after you take out things like rent, mortgage payments, all sorts of, food, electricity, etc., etc. $876 doesn't go very far. So we need to keep that in mind with the appropriateness of the referrals that we give. Tell me whether you need to call the service. Tell me whether you need to print out a letter or write a letter, and the information that you give to the patient. Now this could be, things like name of website is written on a post-it note and given to patient. Much more technical terms. And that's fine, as long as you tell me that that patient has been well referred and understands the process. Also, as I said before, explain why this is the service that you've chosen for Mr. Lee and integrate this into your writing. It's not a standalone bit, actually integrate it into the writing. So, here we have an example of the mapping. This is a patient I made up this morning. Her name is Moira, because that's my neighbour's name. And her problem is that she had a fall at home when she was carrying dishes to the sink. So I said, this is a mechanical fall, no chest pain, no dizziness. So this is telling me this is just a simple trick. And as you'll remember from the lectures, that I'm sure that you have all watched, there's a difference between a mechanical fall and something a little bit more sinister like a syncope. So it's important to make those delineations. The goal of care is to prevent any further falls from happening. That's fairly self-explanatory, isn't it? And the nursing interventions that I've decided to do for Moira are, firstly, I'm going to check her postural BP. There's no evidence of postural hypertension, and her visual acuity is NAD, which means no abnormalities detected. So I'm happy that, see how I've linked these two blue pieces of text here? I've said it's a mechanical fall. I've also checked that there's nothing to indicate that it wasn't. So again, I've checked what's in the health assessment. Now, down here, I've done a quick balance assessment. This is not an unusual or very time-consuming assessment to do. It's very, very easy, actually. This is where your physios become your greatest resources, because they teach you these things. And I've noticed that she's had lower limb weakness. So she's struggling a little bit to get up from the chair. She's also, when she's sitting down, she gets to a certain point and then, because her body doesn't have the strength in her lower limbs to support her. Now, I've also noticed that when people are walking, they can have great balance, but once you put something in their hands that they need to concentrate on, like a glass of water, or in this case, Moira was carrying dishes back to the sink, you'll find that their balance gets altered because their brain is concentrating on this, and it's left up to the muscle strength to maintain their balance. So that's an important aspect to note here. So I'm going to promote gentle exercise tomorrow to strengthen her muscles, because we've already identified that that's an issue. Now, she's got a past history of ballroom dancing, as does my neighbour. And this can be a long-term goal, but we need to get to that later on. Education was provided regarding falls, prevention strategies in the home. We discussed the role of this, blah, blah, blah. I gave her a checklist, happy days. Now, in the rationale column, what I've provided is why I've done what I've done. We know that there's evidence to say that postural control declines, thusly you're at an increased risk of falls. We know that given an object to carry, some people slow down, that identifies them as a higher risk for falls. We know that Moira has a history of osteoporosis. Just osteoporosis. There we go, got it. And therefore her risk of a fracture, and a significant fracture, actually triples in this case. So we know that exercise programs help people build strength and prevent falls. Now down here in this red box is where I've included my reference information. It's fairly concise. There's not a lot of information that you need to put into it. This is just generic information that you can find via a quick Google search. And my goals at the end, essentially she's going to remain fall free, she's going to regain her independence, she's going to report increased confidence with her balance, and eventually she's going to feel confident enough to get back to ballroom dancing. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about in terms of linking concepts. See how in green, we're talking about the idea of carrying something. So we've identified that as a linked concept through. But also, we've linked the osteoporosis because we already know that that's a factor. But it's not a standalone factor. Osteoporosis by itself is not something that people tend to visit a clinic or initiate primary health care visits for. It's an incidental risk factor that we need to keep in mind. But I've actually linked it into this. Osteoporosis and falls, it's not a hard link to make, but that's what I expect to see. Also down here, I've, again, I'm pointing at my screen, I'm sorry about that, but I've talked about how Moira was discussing that she felt a bit lonely, felt a bit isolated. I've linked that in because she's going to a 12-week seniors group exercise program. Boom! That's the socialization right there, making the links. What else will we talk about? Strengthening muscles. So see how I have identified in purple over here? So we've talked about strengthening muscles. And the program that I've designed, I have referred her to, does exactly that. So it's a relevant community program. And keep in mind that these community programs exist. These are real things. 12 weeks of exercise programs 3 times a week in the community, free of charge. You know, this is an amazing thing that could potentially change this fictional patient's life. So as nurses, we need to get to know these things. Okay, before I move on, does anyone have any questions about the example that I've provided here? Sorry about the awkward pause. I'm going to keep going and come back if we need to. Okay, so developing a handover. Once we've done all the mapping, and we've just whizzed through that because this is a potentially easy assignment, we need to develop an in-file handover. So, if we look at this as a summary of the assessment that we talked about before, fantastic. So the information that you provide in this handover introduces Thomas to the ACAT team. So, and it also gives them an idea, even though they will go out and see Thomas in his own environment. Sounds like an elephant. But, you know, even though they'll go out to see him, it's a good idea to say, hey, I am a little bit concerned about this. This is a priority for Thomas at the moment. And we need to provide these priorities within the handover, as I said before. So the handover format. Now you can write this out as a paragraph, or you can write it as, you know, identify ... and situation ... However you'd like to. I don't mind how you do this. First of all, we start with the identification. Identify you. And you can be a registered nurse in whatever primary practice that you want. How amazing. I'm giving you the permission to give yourself your dream job in primary healthcare. And then identify the patient with 3 identifiers, and all that information is on the assessment form. So the situation. Why is Thomas seeing you? Why are you calling them? We're not giving a lot of detail in here. Think about this as, if I called, let's call the ACAT RN Rebecca. If I called Rebecca and said, hi Rebecca, I need to talk about Mr. Lee, but then didn't tell her why I was calling. It'd be a bit odd and awkward, and Rebecca would be going, what? Who is this crazy woman? Okay, let's just introduce her to the topic slowly. Then a background. So just a quick summary, abbreviated summary. Go nuts with your abbreviations and acronyms that are of a standard format. About his medical history, recent changes in his condition or presentation of life, his social history, and investigations and examinations only if you feel that they are relevant to this ACAT assessment. Okay, so think about it. They may not need to know about his PSA, prostate specific antigen. It's a blood test for prostate cancer. Just keep that in mind. They may not need to know about that, so you don't need to include every single piece of information, only the ones that will be relevant to an ACAT team. So with your assessment area, talk about what priorities have been identified, things that you're concerned about. And then in the request, what do you think Mr. Lee would benefit from? And tell them briefly about the referrals that you've made to other organisations. So the other 2 referrals that you've made. Easy. Okay. So the marking rubric. Super exciting information, isn't it? Yeah, you can get 15 marks for the quality of the things that you identify in the care plan. 15 marks. That's amazing. Please make sure that they are holistic, so not just talking about osteoarthritis, but talking about osteoarthritis as it relates to Mr. Lee. Being specific. Not this, just this one. Okay. The summary of your handover, making sure that it has the key aspects that are clearly set out and prioritized, and these priorities act specifically to promote Tom's independence. Use the approved template, write so I can understand you, and then your research. You do need to use appropriate resources. I don't want to see any consumer websites. I don't want to see any Wikipedia entries. I don't want to see any crazy things that crazy consumer websites. Just peer-reviewed journal articles that we've all come to know and love. And government resources and websites. Fantastic. Now, the only consumer websites that you can use are for the referrals that you make. So, yeah, if that's the only communication that you can have with them, include the website, and any information that you have that you've taken from the website, include the reference. So, my expectations. Please make the links between the concepts. This is what makes it a third-year care plan. Don't be disease or medically orientated. We are not talking about an acute care focus here. It's very easy to fall into this trap. So you're not diagnosing Tom with anything. You're looking at Tom as he is. You've got all the information there in front of you. Please go ahead and review that as it is relevant to Tom. So we're not acting as a GP. We're not suggesting that. Okay. So again, the focus of the care plan is Mr. Lee, not old people everywhere, just beautiful Mr. Lee. So include services which may be suitable with specific detail as we went over before. Keep in mind, this is a primary health care facility, not an acute care facility, as I said before. This is important because a lot of the care plans that you see online or in various other readily available places that students tend to cut and paste from are acute care focused. So they will talk about things like recommend extra pain relief or something like that. And then in the nursing interventions, go back and check on patients. In a primary healthcare facility, you don't have the ability to go back and check on the patient because that patient has already gotten on the bus and is going home and sitting up with his feet in front of a daytime TV show or something like that. He's already gone. So you need to adapt that ability to follow up on things. If you want to assess the effectiveness of something, you need to start thinking about how am I going to do that? If you know that in a primary healthcare setting, if you say to a patient, okay, so how is the new medication going? They'll go, yeah, pretty good. But if you want specific details, there's techniques that we can use, such as asking people to keep a diary about their pain. And other little adaptations that we can use. So again, please don't feel like you can cut and paste from care plans that are available and tinker with them. This is a primary care facility. Okay. Proofread your work. I read an analogy the other day that said with every Facebook post that we write, right? I know that if I'm on my phone and I go, yeah, that's funny, and write a Facebook post, I always proofread it. And I proofread it before I hit post or send because I don't want to look like an idiot in front of other people. I don't want to use poor grammar. I don't want to misspell something. And I don't want to have a sentence that doesn't make sense. I am your Facebook. If I read a sentence that doesn't make sense, I will go, what? If there's a spelling error in it, you're third year now. This needs to be nipped in the bud. Proofread your work before you send it to me. Write like an RN, please. Don't word count waffle. Don't waste words getting to 2,000 words. If you're trying to waste words and get up to a certain point, chances are you haven't looked at this holistically enough. There is a lot of concepts that can be covered. Not all of the issues need to be mapped. Just ensure the ones that you choose are priorities and they promote independence, not dependence. That's an interesting point. It's not an interesting point, it's an important point. And right as your goals have already been discussed and agreed by Thomas. So if we're talking about something and saying, Thomas will attend, it kind of sounds like you're telling Thomas to do something. But if we write, Thomas has agreed to attend, fantastic. So Thomas has had some, fictional Thomas has had some input into this discussion. Now, as I said with the first with the first essay, I have a zero tolerance for plagiarism, none whatsoever. And same applies here. There are huge academic ramifications for plagiarism. Now, with this care plan, I would assume that there will be discussion on Mr. Lee himself. But keep in mind that colluding or providing the answers for other students won't help them be a better RN. And that's why we design these assessments, to help you be a better RN and identify the issues for other people. Just keep that in mind when you're sharing information. Alright, referencing. We need to reference Any information that you use from another source, you need to reference and give credit to. As I said before, consumer websites for referrals if it's applicable, none others. Peer-reviewed journal articles, very exciting. Government policies and resources. Don't worry about referencing your own words or when you're referring to the case scenario. I wrote it, so you don't need to reference me. References from 2010 onward only, nothing older. And the reference is to start on a new page, just tack up in the end. Now, if you want to submit this to, no, because everyone will submit this, that was a stupid thing to say. When you put this on LearnLine, put a page break between the end of your ISMA handover so you can have a new page for your references. And that way when you put it through Safe Assign, it doesn't change the formatting and make it look horrible. Hanging indent. Everyone needs to remember the hanging indent and make sure that you've got it around the right way. That provided me no end of giggles. Just do a quick Google search as to what a hanging indent is and which way it goes. So extensions. I'm happy to provide extensions, that's no problems. I know that life happens. Being on placement is not a good reason for an extension. So we need to go by the policy. And the word policy you will get to know and love over your career, so you might as well start it now. So when you apply for a policy, when you apply for an extension, include your name and your number, the reason why you're applying for it, supporting documentation. So you need a medical certificate or a bereavement notice or a letter from your employment or something. You need to attach a copy of your rough draft, and this is completely essential. There will be no extensions given without a rough draft. I also want to see, because I had a lot of trouble with people applying for extensions when they did submit. It turned out that they hadn't viewed the learning resources. So if you're going to apply for an extension, you need to send me this. Just a quick selfie of you watching the collaborate session. Fantastic. That way I know that you're on track and you'll be okay with this case study. Because think of me as your mama bear who was worried about your well-being. I need to know that you're doing the work. Life happens, things get in the way, I get that. But you need to be on track and doing the work anyway. Okay. We're done. Ladies and gentlemen, that's super exciting, isn't it? So, any questions? Pop them up now. I will say, though, I understand that you are all under a lot of pressure, and this time of the semester is when a lot of anxiety hits in and you find yourself sitting in a room just staring at a computer screen, not actually doing something. I'm here for you to help with whatever you need. If you need some guidance, they actually pay me to be here. I'm not here on a voluntary basis, so you don't need to feel bad about asking me questions. I'm ridiculously approachable. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Yes, this is a difficult assignment because the answers aren't provided for you. You have to use all of that scaffolded knowledge that you have learnt this semester from all of the fantastic lectures that I've done that are online that you've all watched. And again, please, it relies on your ability to use all that knowledge and draw out the references and draw out the issues yourself. So I apologise if this is considered to be hard, but this is what will make you a good nurse in the long run. Okay, so does anyone have, is it okay to use medical abbreviations for the handover? Susan, you can use abbreviations through the entire mapping, darling. Go nuts. Don't make them up yourself. Use the standardized ones that we all know and love. So I will actually know what it is that you're talking about. Do you have a limit of how many references you require? I don't care, is the short answer. The academic answer would be, for a 2,000 word essay, you'd be looking at a minimum of maybe 5. But again, as long as they are good quality references, I don't care. Do we need to reference the rationales? Any information that you get from another source, and I'm assuming that you're going to get this academic information from another source, you need to reference. Regarding his mental health assessment, I can score a 7, not 5, indicating some depression. Is this right? Funnily enough, Kylie, I'm quite glad that you brought that up, because it seems like one of your lecturers could not count. Yes, the score is 7. And I find it very, very embarrassing, and I actually meant to change that once it was first pointed out to me, but then I completely forgot. So yes, the score is 7 because your lecturer can't add up to save herself. Right. Well, we're going to move on now, and I'm sure... oh, no, more questions. Sorry. Question, but the mapping is on the template. Yes, absolutely. Write it straight onto the template, just like the example that I had there before. You can tap away till your life's content. So, essay consists in 2 parts. 1 essay, 2,000 words. No. So, all up, it is 2,000 words, 1,500 words for your mapping, 500 words for your ISBA handover, and then your references tacked on the end. Do we need to follow the template or write an essay? No, just on the template. This is not an essay. This is just dot points. I'd prefer that you didn't use bullet points, only because it changes the formatting and it makes it hard to read. Just points in an essay, just like the example that that showed you. Stupid question, you don't want the colours in the mapping, do you? No, I don't want the colours in the mapping. You're absolutely right, Jenna. Thank you so much for pointing that out. That was just for my purposes so I could point things out to you. Can we access the PowerPoint? I will put this on LearnLine after we're done, actually. And if you could spread the word to your beautiful friends on whatever social media site that you belong to that lecturers don't know about, that the PowerPoint is there, but you need to be able to view the session first, because there's a lot of information that without viewing it will be lost. There's no minimum number of problems that comes under each section. Just read the assessment and write about what strikes you, write about what you think the priorities are. 1,500 words is for the care plan. This is a bit similar to our assignment in MedSurg with Beryl. Yes, it is. Great, but it has more of a community focus. You can click Save Now up top and get the whiteboard now. Good-o. Thank you, Peter. All right, so we're all done. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much. I hope you have a wonderful week. As I said, any questions, please don't sit alone in a room and cry. Let me know about it. I'm always, I'm here to help. That's what they pay me for. So, have fun. See you later.